Thanks for tuning in to Minds of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Luis Acevedo, and with me today I have Johnny Android. Johnny is the host of the worldcast Simulation Nation, which is a YouTube channel, and it is a virtual reality live show that he does every week. So, Johnny, thank you for showing up.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm smiling behind my avatar. You can't see it. Maybe you'll catch it in my voice, but happy to be here. And yeah, good to meet you.
Yeah, likewise, man. So, I think a good place for us to start is your beginnings in virtual reality. How did you get started in virtual reality?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, in about 2016, I tried on a headset and I tried this little, what we would not call today full virtual reality. We'd call it a 360 video, but back then it was the best thing we had. And it was this little thing called Evolution of Verse by Chris Mill. And it was just this simple experience where you were on a lake and then there was a train coming and then the train explodes into your face and becomes a bunch of birds. And I was so taken by it that I took off my headset after 3 minutes and was like, well, there goes the film industry. Like, and I come from the film industry. And so I was just like, this is so mind blowing to me. And I actually felt like, you know, if you go back into the history of cinema, it's like the Lumiere brothers back in Paris in the turn of the century, 1900s, had this video. All it was a video of, or I guess a film of a train entering a station. And that train entering the station, people were so freaked out by it that they raced out of the room because they thought they were going to get hit by the train. Right. So I love this experience so much that I bought a little Google Cardboard at the time which you could put your smartphone into and you could put it to your face. And it was a very sort of rudimentary form, but I brought it back to my 100-year-old grandpa and my mother. And I was like, you guys got to try this. And I gave it to my mom to try. And when the train in Evolution of Verse comes at you, she threw it across the room. And I said, we're right at Lumiere Brothers again. Like, this is literally what happened in 1900 with film. And then film became the dominant art form of the 20th century. And so for me, I was like, well, this is the very beginning. We're the pioneers of the dominant art form, which when all is said and done, the 21st century, I believe, will be the virtual reality century. That'll be the dominant art form. And so I was just like, I've got to be involved. And so I'm a writer-director by trade in the film industry, and I have agents and managers. And so I went to the team and I said, look, guys, this virtual reality thing, I want to get involved with it. Can you help me get involved with that? And they were like, virtual reality? That's just like an empty gimmick. That's what are you talking about? That's stupid. Like, and so I instead of really throwing caution to the wind and firing my team and going off and becoming a virtual reality expert, I decided to spend the next few years writing my pilots and my feature screenplays about the content of virtual reality. So they were about virtual reality, but they were not in virtual reality. And I made it my hobby to sort of become more involved in virtual reality on the side. And so sort of like day job, doing the writing stuff, and then the fun hobby stuff is to do the VR stuff. And so it sort of, it went like that for a while. And then, but I didn't have my own headset actually. And then finally, the pandemic hit, and for my birthday at the beginning of the pandemic, my wife and I were going to go on a trip for my birthday, but of course we were in quarantine, so I couldn't. So instead of spending the money on a trip, we decided finally I got a headset for my birthday for my wonderful wife. And now she never sees me anymore because I'm just like, so basically from her buying the headset to me having my first episode of the worldcast in virtual reality was about two weeks, I think. So it was like fish to water. Like I immediately dove into that world, put together a show and released it. At first, it was purely in podcast form. So it was only audio, and it was on Spotify and iTunes. And then we have since progressed from that. And now I think that the podcast element of our show is the smallest portion. And actually, our our productions in virtual reality are what are expanding and growing and sort of the most exciting to me. So, just to give you an example, so I built my own world. So I now have a cyberpunk world, and you can see, for those of you, I guess, watching your show on YouTube, you can see my avatar and you can see Simulation City behind. So that's where we have our Simulation Nation world. That's like our cyberpunk city, our home away from home. And we can go in there and we have these events. So first of all, built the world and sort of built an audio visual show that we have running in the background as we do our episodes. And then the most exciting and crazy thing is that there's something called MREs, which are mixed reality extensions. And so let's say, I had an event the other day called Love in the Metaverse. And it was about people who had fallen in love in virtual reality, had fallen in love in avatar form, and then had decided, let's meet each other over Zoom or FaceTime and continue to fall in love, and then met in real life. And we had couples that were together, and then they were moving in together, and we had a couple that got engaged. And they had the first time they have ever met in human form, which we might call meet space, or we might call Metaverse. That's the newest term. The first time they met in real life, he proposed to the woman, and she said yes. So so in any case, that event, we had giant hearts, like I don't know, the size of a room, fall from the sky, and then when you touch them, they shoot off into the sky and explode into heart fireworks. And it's like, that's what you can do every episode. You can do something insanely awesome that is like mind-blowing to think that it's so easy with a snap of a finger. You're doing a Love on the Metaverse episode, and you have giant hearts falling from the sky and doing heart explosions and things like that. So that kind of stuff is really expanded. And we started off having one central camera that was a static camera, and now our last big episode on Saturday, we had 5 cameras. So we have a 2-shot, which is the shot of the stage. We have a master shot that's up like a drone shot that covers the audience and the stage. We have 2 roving cameras. So we had people that are moderators, and they help us. They're volunteers. Some of them are part of our integral team, and they are sort of like a tracking crane going across the audience. And then we've got another person who was zooming in on the audience when they were asking a question or when they were commenting. So what used to be the smallest portion of the show, which is like, let's just record the podcast for the audio, is now becoming this massive production. But sometimes we've got a 5-person crew. We've got MREs that are specific to that event. We've got a visual show with slides and things that you can go to look at on our Instagram. And we've got music. We've got a video show before the show starts. So when people are entering, we've got music that goes along with this video thing. So there's just a lot more going on, and it's really crazy how it's expanded. And so that's a really long way of answering your short question.
Yeah, no, man, I like it. And there's so much to unpack there because you covered a lot. And, there's so many areas that I want to dive into, like your thoughts on the future of film. Obviously, you think that, I would assume that it's going to be in virtual reality. I've already seen some short films actually from some VR actresses that I've discovered on Twitter and Instagram, and that stuff looks really interesting, but still in its infancy. But where I want to focus on right now is the relationship aspect of the metaverse and virtual reality, because I think that my marriage started from, I think, the precursor to what is now, I think, going to be dating, which is on the metaverse, where my wife and we met online, right? Which I never thought growing up that I would meet my, significant other online. And, but I did. And so a lot of people, I think, are going to have a hard time processing the fact that people are going to have these intimate relationships in virtual reality. So I guess, what are your thoughts on the, future of dating, if you will? Do you see this becoming more common as time goes on and more people enter into, the metaverse, this all space VR?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I know you were the first gen where it was like you met online, and people would sometimes look at you sideways, right? They were like, "Wow,
Right.
wait a minute, are you sure you want to be dating online?" And I have a dating coach friend who is still thinks in that way, and then I'm like, well, then there was the swiping apps where then my dating coach friend was like, yeah, but you can't meet someone like that. That's just so superficial. But I met my wife on a swiping app,
Well,
right?
that's
So
actually how I met mine too. I'm sorry. So
okay,
so
yeah,
we're
yeah.
on the same page. Yep.
Yeah. And then because it was not like Match.com or eHarmony where you had all these extensive, elaborate, written up profiles. It's just pictures that you're swiping through. So then, and then of course now it's going into virtual reality. And so the way I look at it is like where people meet, where they spend a lot of their time, they are going to interact with other people and they are going to become emotionally connected to other people. So the thing that we found fascinating about this episode that we did on love in the metaverse is that it's yes, it's true, you look like an animated figure, you look like a cartoon in your avatar, but there's a real person behind that. There's a soul behind that cartoon that comes across. And the interesting thing is that someone might be insecure in real life about whatever it might be, their style, they have a birthmark like in that movie Ready Player One around her eye or something like that, and they don't have to be so self-conscious about that stuff, and they can sort of be liberated in virtual reality to get to know the person for who they truly are. And so people, the big mental shift to make is that actually it's not more superficial to meet someone in avatar form. In some ways, it's more authentic because you're not caught up with the trappings of the real world, the style, the Gucci bag, the like proper haircut, the cool glasses, whatever, all that stuff is out the window, and you're meeting a person. It's blind dating, basically. There was that show Love is Blind, I think on Netflix. And I think that that is a real indicator of where we're headed, where and we would talk to these people and they were like, they would talk about their dates. They would be like, oh yeah, I met this guy at a party and at first he didn't look at me and I was like, who is this guy? But then we ended up after that party going to an after party at this Brooklyn rooftop and we talked all night and we had drinks. Oh, and then my battery ran short, so I had to like say goodbye. And it's like, whoa, everything you said felt like the real world, right? Except the fact that your battery in your headset was running out, and so then you had to call the date short, and it all happened in virtual reality. And so I really do think that the more, wherever we spend time, that's where we're going to meet the person. So if right now people spend I don't know, 10% of their time on online and Instagram and Twitter and all of that, just imagine in the future when you're spending 20% or 30% of your time in the metaverse for your job or for your office meeting. Instead of going you're working remotely and you're flying, instead of flying to a location to meet somebody, you're meeting them in a Facebook Horizons office or something like that. Of course, then 20 to 30% of the people you'll meet will be in there, and that then maybe 20 to 30% of the relationships to form will be out of that. I think it's in direct relationship to how much time you spend in these environments is how more frequently you will develop real emotional bonds with these people.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I really like when you said that, in a way it's almost more genuine because you're not, blinded by, whether it be just their pure beauty or what, with their social status, how they're signaling, like you said, with the
Yeah,
Gucci bag or a Rolex or something really fancy, right? So you're getting to
right,
hear the person's voice, get to know their personality, assuming that they're being genuine.
right.
And but the thing that I thought about as you were talking is uh, how do you think this will disrupt traditional relationships? And what I mean by that is I think it would be a lot easier for one to potentially have a side chick or a side dude in
Right.
virtual reality, right?
Right. Well, that's a great point. So I'll say two things about that. First, I would say that if we really wanted to get deep about that, have you maybe you've talked about Ray Kurzweil in this show? I'm not sure. Ray Kurzweil is really the guy who awakened me to the ideas of keeping your mind open to what the future will be, because everything you experience and know now is probably going to change. We're accelerating growth and change in technology. And so Ray Kurzweil wrote Age of Spiritual Machines, which was my favorite one. He also wrote Transcendence and a few others. And he's this futurist who worked for Google and has many patents. And all of that kind of stuff. And it has really predicted a lot of the changes that have happened in society over the last 20 years. I think Age of Spiritual Machines was written in the 90s. So he would say, he actually wrote this in the 90s. He said that in some sense, monogamy may be on the way out. This is him talking. I don't know if I agree with this, but I think he was saying that, you know, we'll have all these different forms and all these different identities depending on what medium we are exchanging information in. And so you may have in society an opening up and a liberating of what relationships are, what monogamy is. So maybe in the real world, you'll have one spouse, but maybe you'll both be, yeah, of course, it's no big deal. We'll go into a party in the metaverse. And, you know, the thing is that, you know, right now we're at the base stage, the rudimentary stage, but wait till we get haptic suits. And haptic suits are where you put it on and the person, a person in Tokyo touches your arm in your avatar and you feel it on your haptic glove that someone is grabbing you. Okay, well, you take that idea and let your mind go a little X-rated with it. And you can imagine that all of this, any kind of intimacy is going to be fabricated through the metaverse with people who are working and living remotely. So someone who may be interested in watching, you know, a two-dimensional porn right now will be able to experience that in full sensation in the future. And so are we going to have stricter rules and are we going to have stricter guidelines, or are we going to be more open to that kind of stuff? Now, I will say that my wife would never be open to that kind of stuff. And so I am not condoning that behavior or anything like that. I'm just saying that it's a possibility. And if we go out 20, 30, 40 years down the line, will our ideas change? It's possible.
Yeah, you know, I tend to think that they will. It's funny that you brought up Ray Kurzweil and what he said about monogamy, because before I even asked the question, I was like, so is monogamy just gonna just like go away slowly? You know, but like your wife, my wife, you know, same thing, dude. You know,
Right.
so and and I'm just more of a traditional kind of person in that sense. But it's very interesting to see how society is being, you know, reshaped in a way. You know, like we have these talks of, not to get on a conspiracy theory or anything like that, but the Great Reset, you know, that topic encompasses so much, and I think that it also encompasses what we're talking about right now, and you know, relationships. Like we're going to basically be, as we're you know you know, working with these high technologies and integrating them in our everyday lives, things are going to change so much in how we feel things. You know, like I'm sure there's going to be new social medias that come out specifically for feeling people's emotions. You know, like I can see how that would be appealing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I mean that's probably not anywhere near where we are now, but I for sure imagine that you know, what if you could in the future capture a three-dimensional shot of a sunset that you're watching in Hawaii, but you could also capture the feeling you feel, right? So if you have sensors and electrodes that are maybe attached to your body in a non-invasive way under your clothing, and that catches your heart rate and it catches the release of endorphins or whatever. I mean, you can imagine that in the future, there's going to be, yeah, like a you know, Instagram for feeling or Instagram for an emotion. There was that movie Strange Days, which we do reviews of old movies about VR as well. And that movie captures, there's a black market where people would capture a memory and then they would sell it on the black market. So they'd rob a bank and then they'd sell the memory to allow people to feel what it feels like to have robbed a bank. And so I for sure think that's coming. I don't think it's anywhere close to where we are technologically, but yeah, absolutely. That stuff's on its way.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. And when I was doing a little bit of research into what you can do in the alt space, it really fascinated me. The one thing in particular was how you can be watching something like a YouTube video or something while you're there, but then if there's other people around, you would have the option to show it for everybody else as well. And I think that's going to be something that progressively grows into, you know, what we can consider science fiction now. Like we look at Black Mirror, that's where my mind goes right away. Where I'm thinking of that episode. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, where they could record their memories and they can display it for everybody else to see. And so it's just very fascinating. And then it puts into question our level of privacy, which is, I think, a good place to go to next, because, you're talking to me in your avatar, right?
Right.
And you're I'm trying to think of the word for it. What is it? Um, Alter ego, but that's not the word I was looking for.
Well,
Like,
it's a pseudonymous identity.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and it's anonymous, but it's pseudonymous, meaning that it's consistent over time. And so I kind of the beginner of all of this, of course, is Satoshi Nakamoto, who is, I think, the first one who really created a pseudonymous identity that is changing our world as we speak. And no one to this day knows if it was a man, a woman, a group of people, someone from the future who time traveled here, an AI. No one knows, right? No one knows what that person is. And so yeah, so I think where you're going with that question is that it's like, how do we differentiate between the two worlds, the meat space world and the virtual world? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, in a way, and just privacy in general. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it's there's, look, I'm big into the crypto world, and there's Plan B, no one knows who he is, and Satoshi Nakamoto, and there's all of these, and it's becoming more and more popular now with people who are into NFTs, that their identity is their CryptoPunk name and number, right? So CryptoPunk 8995 is the identity online of that person. So why do they want to do that? Well, maybe Plan B works for a central bank, and he's talking about the ends of the central bank with cryptocurrencies, and he doesn't want to destroy his day job. A guy that I think is ultra brilliant, and I love his tweets, is Balaji. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but it's if you go to on Twitter, it's type in Balagi, Balaji. He's brilliant, and he sort of talks about the fact that we're getting into a very precarious time in the real world where who knows what's going to happen with society. It's changing so fast, it could fragment and deconstruct or whatever. And so you want to be able to have your career separate from the things that may be happening in the real world. And so you just want to be able to have, we can have that now. We can have a different identity. And I don't look at it, to be perfectly honest, I don't look at it as much as security for me, although I think that's fascinating, and I think it's interesting to think about it. And I think, yeah, maybe 10 years from now, we're going to be in some civil war, and I want to be able to live on in the simulation nation with a whole other life there and not have to worry about the craziness in the world. But but what's closer to me in my heart is that I'm a sci-fi writer. And for me, it's like, wait a minute, I could create an entire character with a history, with a mythology from a different dimension, and why not untether myself from reality? It's just more fun. It's just cooler, right? It's just like, I get to, it's like, okay, I'm going to write a novel. Well, why don't I write the author of the novel as a character also, and just take it to the meta level, and just like really just dive all the way in, so that the entire book comes from another dimension, from a writer from another dimension. And so I think that's, for me, that's the more fun of it. It's less security and danger at this point, and it's more about fun and experimentation, and just sort of pushing the envelope of story and mythology. So that's really where I'm coming at it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking about coming from other dimensions, Johnny Android, he comes from another dimension, Earth IE2. Is that right?
That's right, EI2, exactly.
You want to go into that backstory a little bit, how you came up with that?
Yeah, sure. The backstory is that I came up with it because it's the truth, Luis. And that is that I am from an Earth EI2 dimension, which is very similar to ours, to the one that you're in right now and the one that I'm visiting you in. However, it ended in a horrible dystopic fate. And I realized, having grown up in that reality, that there was still a chance across the multiverse for me to send the messages of that may help other dimensions, into their lives. And so what I did is I teleported from my dimension along with my bot, hero protagonist. We were able to escape EI2, the dystopic dimension, and come into our dimension. And of course, these episodes of these worldcasts that I do here, embedded within them are messages of hope and messages of what went wrong in my dimension and how to save yourselves from the same fate. And so, in some way, I'm here from an alternate reality to tell you guys to just be careful, because we could end very poorly if you're not careful.
Well, could you go into how it ended in your world?
Well, I don't want to change your timeline. And so let's just say that if we continue down the path we're on in this reality with multinational corporations and centralization and environmental destruction and this sort of ossification of me versus them, and all of these, anything that you see today that are the seeds of what could become a dystopia, I think it's fair to say that all of those things came true in the other dimension. And so all of them are issues and topics to be discussed and to be worked on here.
Fair enough. So going back to the world building, you said that you built the world in which you do your worldcast. Could you go into a little bit on how you came up with the idea, and do you have to have any like any training to do that? Because I mess around with Unity a little bit, and I've followed their tutorials to make the games and stuff like that, but by no means can I just build the world on my own yet, so like
Right.
how does that work, and how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, so I do our shows in a platform called Altspace. So you've heard the term metaverse. We've talked a little bit about it. Right now, I think we're back in the early 90s of the metaverse. So in the early 90s, there was no broad internet. There was AOL, which is a silo of what the internet was. You had to log into the internet essentially, right? And then there was different ones. There was Yahoo and all these different ones. And over time, it became an interoperable internet that just became an expansive thing. So today, we don't yet have the infrastructure and capabilities to create an interoperable metaverse. And so individual companies are creating siloed metaverses. And so you've got Facebook Horizon, you've got Engage, you've got Altspace. So Altspace is Microsoft's platform. So Altspace started as a bunch of guys in their garage in 2014 or something like that. They grew to a certain size, and in 2017, they sold it to Microsoft. And so what Altspace has is essentially Lego blocks. So you can, if you don't have any experience, like I don't have any experience either, you go into basically an empty space, you create a world, and it's just empty. It's just a black sky and a floor. And then you've got Lego blocks you can play with. So there's different kits, they're called. So there's a cyberpunk kit, there's a space travelers kit, there's a pirate kit, and you can take bits and pieces from all these Lego bricks and you can build your world out of these Lego bricks. And so that's what I've done. So it's a very simple, easy sort of entry into the world building idea. On our show, we interview a lot of insanely talented world builders who use Unity mainly and are very, very advanced and create worlds that are just jaw-droppingly beautiful. I am not at that stage yet. I've tinkered with Unity. I created a world in Unity, and then I tried to upload it into Altspace, and I realized it was 10 times too big to fit into Altspace's parameters. And so I'm working on that. But there's varying levels of difficulty. You can go from me, which was essentially a beginner with an imagination and a bunch of Lego bricks, and then you can go all the way up to professional designers who are inventing space yachts that look absolutely incredible. And so whatever scale, whatever level of difficulty you are comfortable with, you can pretty much find.
Yeah, and now when you talked about interoperability, do you think that the blockchain will help solve that problem?
That's yet to be determined. There are siloed virtual crypto native metaverses also. So there's one called Somnium Space, but it's not interoperable with any of the others. and there's one called Decentraland. So both of those are built on Ethereum protocol. So I believe ERC21 tokens or something like that. So
721s, yeah.
Yeah, so what they are able to do is, if you go log into Somnium Space, you can put your NFT from your Ethereum blockchain into your art gallery, for example. And if you wanted to, you could then another day put that into your Decentraland art gallery. However, you can't teleport from your Somnium art gallery to your Decentraland art gallery as of yet. And I don't know if there's plans in the near term to be able to do that. So I would hope that that would happen. But even then, that's assuming that we are only on the Ethereum blockchain. So
Right.
I like Solana for fast and easy transactions, and for NFTs, you don't have to pay insane gas fees. So then I don't think that my Solana NFT is going to be interoperable with an Ethereum NFT. So we're really still at the beginning of all of this stuff, and none of it's really been worked out. There are chains, I think, like Cosmos and Polkadot that are starting to be interoperable. But then we're talking about, not only is the Ethereum metaverse is just very rudimentary and simplistic and siloed, but then the Cosmos and Polkadot communities aren't even they don't have anything yet to be able to connect it. So it's like we're the settlers who've just arrived in North America, and the train tracks haven't even been laid yet to be able to cross the country. We're still in horse and buggy, off into the brave metaverse west, but we're a little bit away from that yet. But I think in the future, I certainly believe in a future where that is possible. It's not even, I just don't even know if it's on the roadmap for these companies yet, or for these.
Right. No, I agree with that completely. It's very early to tell, and who knows if something else can, come out and maybe, supplant blockchain. I'm not saying that will happen. I'm not a developer or anything, but, technology does become obsolete over time because we just keep progressing. So who knows what will be the tool that, connects the metaverse, so that way we can, interact in it the same way as like a Ready Player One type scenario or something, right? So it's definitely a long ways away. But the other area I wanted to touch on, because I've always been curious on how the people in the virtual reality world who are doing things like you are, because there's a few other people who are starting podcasts in virtual reality and talking about various things. So how do you come across and find your guests? Because I don't know a single person in, I know you consider virtual reality real life, so I'll call it the meat space for the sake of this conversation. In the meat space, in my local meat space, I know nobody that uses virtual reality, myself included. As we talked before the show, I do want to, but so how do you find, these people to be able to do your show? Because it's still, I think, a very niche, group of people.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I would say that my first many episodes were with friends that were, so I had a smattering of friends, coming from the film industry. I had a few friends who've been dabbling in this new medium and storytelling in an interactive way. And so that was a part of it. And then I had a co-host at the beginning, but, we're talking about technology not quite being there yet. He would get dizzy a lot. And so he just said, you know what, virtual reality is not for me. And by episode 5, he was out. I was like, oh, shoot, I've got to find guests every week. And then, the interesting thing that happened, at the beginning, I was interested in hosting events in all the different virtual reality apps, which you may call metaverses today. So VR Chat, Rec Room, those are very popular ones, more popular than Altspace purely by numbers, but they skew a little bit younger, so they're more kid oriented. And I just got immersed in the community of Altspace, number one. So this is the first thing that happened, is I just started teleporting around to these different worlds and being like, my God, there's so much talent in here. Who created this world where it's like this cyberpunk world, but there's puddles, and because like as though it just rained, and in the puddles it reflects the neon from the light. And how the heck did they do that? And so I would go to events and meetups, and I just ask around and be like, who made this? And then I would get introduced to somebody and be like, I would love to have you on my show. And so that was the second phase, I think, was just becoming a part of the Altspace community. And the Altspace community is a very strong, intelligent, talented group of people. Whereas I find that like a rec room is just kids sort of on a Saturday goofing around. I feel like this Altspace is really like professionals who are maybe graphic designers or maybe 3D modelers in the real world, and they come in and they just are doing really, really fantastic things in Altspace. So that was phase two. And then phase three, I feel like, these days I've got so many guests. I kind of like, I'm booked for the rest of the year. And so it's kind of like, some people come to me now and say, I would love to be on your show. I see people on Twitter or that are involved in VR, and you just become more and more immersed. And it's grown beyond Altspace now, where I'm getting, for example, I just interviewed the CEO and founder of Victory XR, which has the first real accredited American high school in virtual reality. So you can be an American citizen today. You can be living, as far as I understand it, in Singapore, but want a high school education in America, and you could go to your high school classes in virtual reality, and you will be accredited with a proper diploma, a high school diploma. And so stuff like that guy, those kind of, once you build, I guess, a bit of a reputation and people see you and they start to trust you, and they will listen to some of your podcasts or they see some of your shows on YouTube, and then they just become more easy to say yes, I guess you'd say. And the industry is just growing leaps and bounds. And so I feel like there's too many all of a sudden, where it's expanded beyond Altspace. And it's become now part of the virtual reality community at large, where I can see some people's stuff on Instagram or Twitter or in some Oculus forum or some meetup, or just any place. There's more people that in my meet space life that are like, hey, about this virtual reality thing. So I think that it's just growing and growing and growing, and I'm lucky to be in a place where I've established a little bit of a trust with the audience, and then people are willing to come on now.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because I do think, and I want to touch on this in a second, I do think that the future of influencers is going to be on virtual reality. I think it's also just a natural evolution from you watching your, late night TV show host, and then eventually, and who knows, 10 years, 5 years, you're eventually going to put on your virtual reality headset to go tune into the show that you want to watch or a movie you want to watch. I think that's going to be the future with influencers, and I think you're one of the pioneers in that industry. But where I wanted to touch on next is, I thought it was very interesting how you said that there's different demographics in these virtual worlds. Like the VR chat room brings in a different crowd of people. The rec room brings a different crowd of people. And in Altspace, you said, brings in a totally different group of people between the other two that seem to be more so, I would say, the engineers that are trying to shape and mold and build what the metaverse is going to be. So why do you think that is? Why do you think Altspace brings in those kind of people?
Yeah, and before I get all the hate mail, I will say that there are those people in VR chat, there are those people in Rec Room. I'm making an overgeneralization, and some people would maybe prefer those, and maybe they have communities that I would be very impressed with there as well. But I feel like the signal gets lost in the noise in some of those places. And so I think that the reason that it happened in Altspace is because they were very cognizant and focused on trying to create events. And so they weren't just like, let's go shoot paintball at each other like Rec Room is, right? Or let's play in virtual dune buggies in Rec Room or something like that. So that's more game oriented, and that's going to attract a younger audience, because obviously a 10-year-old kid on a Saturday wants to go into VR and shoot paintball. So that's totally legitimate. And so what Microsoft and Altspace did was they wanted to have more company events, corporate events, educational events. And so they built it around not necessarily the gaming aspect, and not necessarily the not even necessarily the world building aspect, although there is a lot of that in all space. It had more to do with their fundamental core was, let's create an event space so we could have an organized discussion and an organized event. And now they're having concerts where they're beaming in essentially the real life person who would be in a green screen room, and they're getting put into the avatar world. So it's now interacting avatars along with human beings who are maybe a concert is going on there. So Nine Inch Nails was in there the other night, and so stuff like that. So they are much more concerned with being a venue space as opposed to a gaming space. I think that is a lot of it. And then you never know. It might be. I think it's just the essence of, the founders probably had a certain vibe that they created even unconsciously, and that attracted a like-minded type of person. Yeah, I think that's probably the core, though, is the events focus.
Gotcha. That does make a lot of sense. Now, I want to circle back to your thoughts on the future of virtual reality influencers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I for sure think we're headed that way. I don't know if you've heard of Little Michaela. So there are these virtual beings or virtual people or identities, you could say, that are influencers. So Michaela on Instagram has 3 million followers, and she is a virtual being. She's not real, and it's now known that she was invented by this guy who has since started a DAO called Friends with Benefits, and so he's involved in crypto now. But he started Michaela, and it's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. But there's 3 million people who like Michaela and go to her Instagram. If you go to Korea or if you go to Japan, they've already got virtual pop stars, right? There's that show on Fox right now called Alter Ego, with Grimes, and that one is about. It's that one I think is really bringing the idea mainstream to an American audience that there's a person behind the avatar, but you don't really necessarily need to connect with that person. You can connect with the avatar, and it's the same. It's not so crazy, and so I think that that's actually breaking down barriers. It's people's first taste in North America of what it will be like to follow someone who you don't see their true identity. I think in Asia, they're a little more advanced in that. I feel like Japan and Korea in particular, there's very popular pop stars who are virtual beings. So no question, we're headed in that direction. And that's not to say that it will supplant real humans in the meat space world anytime soon, but it can certainly give a run for its money. Because think about it, in the real world, you've got a person who is locked into their biological self. There's no locking into anything in the virtual world but what your imagination can hold. And so one day I could be a performer who's human, and then during the concert I can transform before your eyes into a dragon, and fly over the audience as a dragon, and then take you under my wing, and off we go into have the concert in flying over Mordor, or whatever we want to do. Like the possibilities are so endless that how could it not be something that's going to be very successful in the future.
Yeah, and it was very interesting you bring that up. I wasn't really going for the virtual influencers because I was trying to be cautious on how I worded it, because when I looked up on YouTube a couple days ago, virtual influencers, I was intending to find more people like yourself, but what I ended up finding is, you said, these artificial beings, essentially, these virtual beings who are amassing a large following, and people are creating them. And, as you said, in the Asian countries, they appear to be very popular. Now, going back to the future of filming, because I think that these two are connected as well. So do you see potentially actors being replaced by these virtual influencers for the future of film?
Yeah, so this is a controversial topic in the film industry, of course, because we're already starting to see a little bit of it, where I think it was they're recreating James Dean based on all of the footage that they have of him and all of the photographs, and James Dean is going to be an actor in a movie. And so, of course, that has a lot of copyright questions, and is it respectful to the dead that they're bringing James Dean back from the dead, and would he want us to do that? In a more simplistic or a less controversial form, the latest Star Wars had Carrie Fisher, who, rest in peace. Carrie died before the last one was finished filming, and they continued on with her being a character, and they took photoreal imagery from her from the past, and they put words into her mouth based on her voice, diction and things like that. So it's already happening. And you look at like movies like Pixar and how incredible that those cartoon characters are. Well, imagine if those cartoon characters start to become photoreal. Who's to say that there won't be an actor like a Tom Hanks in the future who we never even know what he looks like in the real world, and we never even know his real name, and he's just plays Woody, or he plays a character, and he has a totally different life. And there's I love Tim Ferriss, who has a podcast about technology and stuff, and he wrote a really interesting article about the it's not all it's cracked up to be famous. You get stalkers, you get people coming to your house, you get hate mail, you get people trying to sue you, you get all of these things. Well, if you had a separate identity, you wouldn't have to worry about that kind of stuff, because it would be sort of the entity that people know wouldn't be connected to you in some way. So it's almost like you get the benefits of being famous without the negative drawbacks, which is like, I don't know if I would love to be famous. Like, would you like to be Justin Bieber, who can't walk down the street without being mobbed? That for me feels like a gilded cage. It feels like a prison of some kind, right? And so this might be a way they can avoid that. Justin Bieber creates a self that only lives on in the metaverse, and he can walk down the street normally in the real world, and he doesn't get mobbed. So,
right.
There's some benefits there, I think.
And it's a new form, I would say, of passive income.
Oh yeah,
you can just create a business through this virtual being that you've created, right? And so do you think that they'll complement each other, like real actors and virtual, like these virtual influencers? Like, because you said it's controversial in the film industry, probably because it's the same controversy that's sparked by autonomous trucks, right? Like they're going to take the truckers' jobs, but do you see this? Do you see more of a symbiotic relationship between the virtual and the real human?
Well, I think that the simple answer is I think that there's going to be a bit of resistance to it. I almost feel like it's like some of those dystopic futures where you see like people are prejudiced against robots, right? Like they're not real, they're a lower class citizen, we're going to beat on them, we're going to, they're not human, they don't have emotion. And there's so many sci-fi movies about that kind of topic. I think that the same thing might happen at first, where there's a resistance to a real actor acting against an AI or something like that. But I think that will go away once there's a hit and money's in their pocket. You know what I mean? Like, I think once they're like, let's say the Harrison Ford of the future is going to be in your movie, but he's only an AI. Are you going to say no to Harrison Ford of the future being in your movie and you getting the exposure of that with a brand new audience who it doesn't mind all of that? I think you'll be very accepting of it, and saying, yeah, great. We'll have, you're telling me that these 50 million fans are going to now watch my performance because I'm acting with AI Harrison Ford. Great, I'll do it because I've got a whole new audience. I think that's a middle step. But in the end of the day, I actually believe that we're headed into a new art form altogether. And so it's not even to think that it's going to be a movie like that necessarily in the future. I think it's going to be an interactive experience that's going to be more take front and center stage of the culture. And so in a game, of course, everyone is used to the idea of a non-player character, or a character who has you meet along the journey, who tells you a clue, or you interact with it a little bit, and then he gives you, you're off on your way. everyone who plays video games knows, oh yeah, of course there's these players that aren't real in there. So okay, take that two-dimensional game that you're playing, now put it in, on your eyes, and you're in that world, and now you're playing Red Dead Redemption, the virtual reality version, and here comes a cowboy who's coming to talk to you, and you're interacting with that cowboy, and he's giving you clues, but he's just a game character, and then you go off on your way. Well, it's going to become so normal. Gamers, I think, already think it's normal, and then I think everyone else who starts to get into these virtual worlds and virtual games, it's going to be so normal as well. And it's like, who cares if they're a part of the game or if they're a real person?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So, do you think as the film industry evolves, and as you said, you believe that it's going to be more interactive, that people will be able to watch or play the movie through numerous perspectives? So, like in a video game, you can play the game one way. Well, in certain ones, right? Like RPGs specifically, you can play a game one way the whole way through, beat it, and have a different ending than you would if you played a different way and became this,
Right.
not necessarily a different character, but just a different person inside the video game, your reputation, whatever that may be. So do you think that there will be something similar like that in movies? Like you can play from this perspective, watch the movie from this perspective one time, and then if you want to rewatch the movie, you can do so, but through the eyes of somebody else and interacting as somebody else in the film.
Yeah, it could be. I think that the term movie, though, is not what it will be, right? So it's
Okay.
not even that art form. I think it's a new kind of art form. So, because a movie is something that is just two-dimensional. And so there are, Bandersnatch, you talked about Black Mirror. Bandersnatch tried to do that, where they had an interactive episode where you can choose where the character goes. You stay the same character, but it's the idea of a choose your own adventure type activity where there's a branching narrative. So that they tried that out. That exists now. But I think that it's more akin to a game almost than it is to a movie. And so, the way I look at it is that I don't think the film industry is going to die, just the way the theater didn't die, right? In the 19th century, theater was and vaudeville was the central art form of the culture, and that's what people went to and to get their their entertainment, and that's what they talked about, around the watering hole or whatever. Then came the film industry that usurped that, and it became the focal point of culture. And that's not to say the theater died. Theater still exists today, and everyone loves to go to a theater, but you don't go to a theater show once a week unless you're in the industry. You go maybe once a year or once every 2 years. It's a very special event. So I think that that's what's now going to happen to the film industry. I think it's going to be usurped by this virtual reality gaming experiential industry. And you'll still have movies, but instead of going to, when I grew up, we were going to a movie a month or whatever, right? I think you'll be going to a movie a year. It'll be like theater. It'll be a special event when like Dune 10 comes out and everyone's like, oh man, we got to see the reboot of Dune. And it's like the one event of the year. But then 90% of the time, you're going to be getting your entertainment from your virtual world. And so you'll be entering into Star Wars instead of watching Star Wars. One day, maybe you'll decide to be Rey, then you'll decide to be Poe, then you'll decide to be BB-8. And I'm really, really embarrassed that I used the new trilogy. For all you kids out there, pretend it doesn't exist. Go back to the originals. I want to play Luke Skywalker. I don't want to be these new. But any case, you get my point. The point is that, and I know there's detractors to that. All my film friends think I'm nuts, by the way. But I would say it creeps up on you. Like first you're like, oh, I'll just spend an hour a week in virtual reality. Then you get to know people, and then you're spending 2 hours a week, and then you're spending 3 hours a week. But the problem is, it's not like you have 2 or 3 more hours in the day. This day is still 24 hours. And so what gets cut out when I spend 2 hours in VR, that's 2 hours of TV or film I was going to watch that I now don't watch. And so it creeps up on you, and slowly but surely, that becomes this focal point of culture. I think that's where we're headed. And so to answer your question, I think that, yeah, I don't think it's the movie as we see it. I think you may have the franchises of the movie world that we know today, but I think they will be done in a gaming type environment.
Yep, that makes complete sense. That's kind of what I was sensing from the little bit of research I've done on that topic specifically. And I kind of find it really interesting how a lot of people still have a hard time, grasping that virtual reality is a real thing that is going to slowly be involved in everybody's life. I mean, think about it. Social media is like a stepping stone to where we are currently. Yeah. Nobody would have ever envisioned or pictured themselves back in the 90s or 80s rather, that they would spend most of their day scrolling through their Twitter feed to see what's going on with news and make friendships that way. And then also Instagram, like taking pictures of their vacations and doing live
food.
In food. Yes, of course. The notorious food. Yeah. Yeah. So like, to me, it just seems very obvious that this is where we're heading, and more people are going to spend a lot of time in these virtual worlds. And another thing that I've sort of thought about as well as maybe a precursor to this are, books or video games, movies, as we've already talked about, because, you're entering, like when you read a book, I love reading books. And, when you read a book, you're getting into that world, whether, you're not physically going there, but in your mind, your imagination, it's just, it's blooming with these ideas that the author's implanting and, the story that they're telling, and you're transported there and, in this immaterial way. So like, these are things that humans have done forever, finding ways to, I guess you can call it a form of escapism, or you can look at it as trying to find different perspectives, because there's a lot of times where, I'll read a book and then I really resonate with a certain character because I see some characteristics that I have, and then I see how they handle certain situations. And then that gives me some insight to potentially take back into my real world. Right. It's just a lot of tools that you can use in that. But I actually wanted to hear your thought on this, circling back to the whole actor thing, because I find it a very fascinating topic. So there's bootleg movies, right? So do you think there will be bootleg influencers? So like, you gave Harris Ford as an example. Do you see there being some issues? I know you're not a lawyer, but just we're just talking here. So like, it being some issues with like some some bootleg Harrison Ford in a movie, but it isn't really him, right?
Totally. Well, yeah, I mean, deep fakes, right? It's like
exactly.
World's about to get really crazy, and if people in this last election didn't know what was real and what wasn't real, we're headed for a world where that's just a baby step. Like it's gonna be nuts, right? Like if you can have the president's mouth moving and his voice saying things that people don't want to hear, but it's all fake. I mean, yeah, anything's possible, right? So that's a really interesting idea where you'll have these bootleg directors who are putting together some kind of AI, Selena Gomez or whatever. Like that's, I mean, for sure. That's, I haven't thought about that, but there's no real way to stop that, I guess, on the black market, unless it's like, well, I guess, where did you get the composite of the images from? Did you get it from other movies? But then if you have enough composites, isn't it avoiding copyright laws? And then like, so right now, if you have a novel and the author's been dead for 70 years, then the novel becomes public domain. So like, for example, Sherlock Holmes is now a public domain IP. Well, what would happen if an actor has died for 70 years or something? Are they public domain now? I mean, there's a lot of fascinating questions there that I mean, I don't know. I guess you could.
Just like cryptocurrency is causing a whole bunch of issues when it comes to tax and the law in general. Virtual reality, I think, is going to cause the same kind of disruption where we're going to have to, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to literally be this reset of how we do things in our society, because it has to be, right? We can't keep the traditional systems.
Right.
They're just not compatible with where we're going and the technology that's being developed right now.
Right.
So it's very interesting. Like another thing I thought of is like, well, what about these actors, these virtual influencers? I'll just keep going back to the Harrison Ford, or you can do a Tom Cruise, Tom Hardy, whoever, right? They have this virtual form of them that's in the metaverse, or the actors. So like, who gets the, really the benefits of that? Is it the people who made them? Is it their family, their estate? Is it divvied up between everybody? Like it's very fascinating, and who knows how that's going to turn out, right? It's going to be interesting watching that unfold.
Yeah.
But I want to circle back around to NFTs, because this is a topic I've been thinking a lot about, particularly when it comes to the avatars, like the PFPs that are very popular right now. As you mentioned, CryptoPunks is the most famous one, and then you have the Bored Ape Yacht Club and a bunch of other ones that are very popular these days. And people are identifying with them, as you were saying earlier, right? There's this sense of identity because we identify with the brands that we like, and that's essentially what NFTs are just doing. They're just the progression of that. So my question is, when I'm looking at, like, for instance, you have this avatar that I'm assuming you were able to customize, and it was probably given to you for free, with the exception that you may had to buy the hardware to actually access wherever it is that you're the avatar. So how do you think that's going to work? Like, because you can pay $1 million, right, for a Bored Ape Yacht Club, and they're talking about potentially making them 3D. And I see videos on Twitter of people in augmented reality. At least one person in particular who's their ape, their PFP in their AR. But why would somebody pay $1 million for that when you could just get your own free avatar? So these are things that I've thought about, and I would like to hear your take on it.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of like Ready Player One, and I don't know if you had read the book Ready Player One, or if you've watched the movie, but the book goes into more detail in terms of resolution and types of clothing that they wear. So if you want to be the sort of generic character, then you could just use the free stuff. But if you want to really create an interesting person in the metaverse, then you've got to buy the swag or whatever, right? So
it makes sense.
We've already started that. So in Altspace, one of our interviews, which is coming up, and it might be one of the ones early next year, is about a designer in Tokyo who designs custom avatar clothing for Altspace. So you can pay him to design you an outfit for this gala in virtual reality that you're going to. So the other day I was at a black and white birthday party ball, and you had to wear only black and white, and you could do your hair white, and you can do your face black if you wanted to, or whatever. But people purchase clothing. And now I just found out that people are also doing hair designs. So there's a hair designer. You can pay them to cut your hair a certain way, and then that's how your avatar will look. So it already exists. But I think where you're going with it is even more interesting when it gets into NFTs, because then it's like, if in Ready Player One, it might be like a coat of armor, or you're playing a game and you could buy that coat of armor, you could sell it on the Ethereum marketplace. Someone else could buy that coat of armor for however many Ethereum, and then, well, the same thing goes for style. So we did talk about earlier how you don't have the trappings of the real world. Well, it's coming, right? Because you're going to have the Gucci NFT bag that someone's going to buy, and people will in the metaverse will be able to know, oh, is that a fake Gucci that you could have just bought for nothing, or is that the real NFT that you paid like 100K for? So that is for sure coming. And there's another, so there's all these different metaverses. There's another platform called Samsar. Samsar, you can buy certain clothing, you can buy dance moves. So you can teach your avatar a particular dance move by buying it, and then they can do the crazy ass dance move that night on a Friday night in the club. You got the move that no one else has, and they're all like, ooh, look at that guy go. So that stuff is happening already. So there's no question that once it becomes interoperable, and once I want to take let's say, I'm in this picture, I'm wearing a vest. Like what if I want to take that vest outside of Altspace and I want to use it on my avatar when I go out in Sansar for a night? Well, we're going to need the interoperable aspect for that. But there's no question it's coming, and no question that the PFPs, I saw something the other day that I thought was really smart, which is the PFPs are the hieroglyphics on the wall of the metaverse. It's just the early rock carvings, and it's the simplistic form, the most simplistic form of what it's going to become. But I think you're sort of touching on it in these Bored Apes. I mean, these Bored Ape and CryptoPunks, they're not just profile pics. That's just how it started.
Right.
They are, CryptoPunks now has a comic book. So they are having storylines, they're having characters that are fully fleshed out, they're having a world that they enter and inhabit. And Bored Ape, they have clothing that you can buy now for the real world. And so they are not only, they're an IP. This is a new way to launch an IP, intellectual property, if, and so it's like but the difference is that's so interesting is like in the past, let's say George Lucas creates Star Wars. He owns the IP, right? But in today's world, let's say that George Lucas creates a series of NFTs. Well, guess what? Everyone who buys that NFT is a co-owner in Lucasfilm.
Right.
They're a co-owner of the franchise. If the franchise gains popularity, their NFT goes up in value. That's like having a stock in the company at the birth of the company. So now in the future is going to be, it's a Star Wars, but instead of all the profits going to the guys who invented it, we all get the profits together. And that's a really fascinating total transformation and paradigm shift in the way we think about money and objects and IP and all that stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's the decentralization of everything, and maybe it's scary and maybe it's not, but we're basically profiteering off of culture at this point, right? Because that's sort of what NFTs are doing. Not that we haven't already done that before, but in a more, I don't know if tangible is the right word for it, but in a more real way for most people, right? Because as you said, like before, George Lucas and his team would be the one who would, receive all the funding for what they've done, all the reward. But now it's going to be distributed. And another thing that I think's not being talked about so much is that with the NFTs, what they're really doing is creating these new brands. So like think of Nike, Supreme, Polo. Well, you got your Bored Ape Yacht Club, as we keep talking about, the CryptoPunks. Like they are going to, in my opinion, supplant these old traditional brands and become.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see that with every accessory, every merchandise that you can think of. There's going to be these new top tier items, and there's going to be, just the hierarchy as we have today in, fashion. But you touched on something that I wanted to get your opinion on because you spend a lot of time in virtual reality, and that is the economy. I remember hearing, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the guy who, he may be the CEO of Epic Games, or he may have just been the guy who created Fortnite. But either way, when he was talking about the metaverse, he was saying that one of the biggest things that are going to need to happen is basically to create an economy where people can be rewarded for playing. And we're seeing this in NFT space right now as well with the pay to play, with the play to earn. So what are your thoughts on jobs in the metaverse, and will some people just spend all of their time working in the metaverse and not have to work in the meat space?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, Axie Infinity is the big one. It's the big breakout hit right now where in the Philippines, people are supporting their families by playing Axie Infinity. So it's on the Ethereum blockchain again, and you buy these Axie and then you battle them. It's kind of like Pokemon. And then if you win the battle, you get the reward, but that reward you can sell in the marketplace for real money. And so people are making real money off of that. And then, Second Life, although it was two-dimensional back in the day, it was maybe it started in the thousands or 10,000s. There was something like $100 million economy or something like that was changing hands, and people were really making real money in that before it kind of lost its luster and its popularity. But I think that absolutely there are going to be people whose job it is to be an architect in the metaverse, and they're going to build virtual buildings, or be a designer and design avatar clothing, and they're going to have a shop in the metaverse that you can go to, and you'll buy it in the metaverse, and it will get maybe either if it's still, it could get shipped to your avatar or on the blockchain, or, if you buy a real item, it could get shipped to your real house in the real world. But they're going to be their shops are going to be in the metaverse. Most of their items are going to be virtual, so they're not going to ever come out of the metaverse. Maybe you'll have tasks. So for example, right now we have friends and volunteers who help on the show, but if we become monetizable, then we would be able to pay camera people, or we would be able to pay moderators. And so their job could be, I'm a professional virtual reality moderator, and they work in the metaverse. There's so as soon as we reach a certain threshold where people are going to be able to sponsor a show like ours in the metaverse, then that sponsorship money will be able to feed back into the economy of the metaverse so that we can build out a team. And yeah, they'll be going, it's like, okay, honey, I'm going to go to work, and they'll just put on their headset. They won't be, getting in the car.
Work from home will take on a new meaning.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. So a little lighter question here. We've been talking very deeply on some of these topics, but for somebody like myself and maybe a lot of my viewers, I would assume, because like I said, this is still very nascent, right? So what would you recommend to somebody who's, spends a lot of time in virtual reality, for somebody, a noob like myself, looking to enter into the space? Is there a particular headset that you would like, that you prefer over another one, or how would one get started, in entering this world?
Yeah, so I will caveat this by saying that I hate Facebook. I do not want them to succeed. They are rebranding. The Facebook brand is so bad right now. They are literally changing their name for Facebook. The announcement is coming next week. Having said that, they have pumped in billions and billions of dollars into their hardware. And unfortunately, it's the best and it's the cheapest. And so I recommend getting an Oculus Quest 2. It's a standalone headset. It's like $299, and that will get you into all of the social VR apps are for free. So it gets you into all this world that I've been talking about. All that stuff's free. And you can also play games, but you would buy those games individually. Like you would play like the Walking Dead game, virtual reality game, and you would pay $30 or something for that, or you'd play the Star Wars game. So you do have to pay. It's just like having a video game console in that sense. But in a video game console like Xbox, you can't hang out in there with buddies for free, right? So there is, it's not only the apps. There's also subscription services. So I do workouts in VR with Supernatural VR. So I mentioned at the beginning that Chris Milk created this thing called Evolutionverse. Well, Chris has gone on to start this company that does a subscription service like Peloton, except it's in virtual reality. So imagine you are doing your workout over top of an active volcano in Iceland, and you're shooting things that are coming at you from the sky into an aerobic workout. That's really what it is. And so that you have a subscription service, you can pay $10 a month or whatever to do that. So once you got the headset, there's a lot of stuff that's relatively inexpensive. And then you can up the ante from there. But yeah, unfortunately, Oculus Quest 2 is the one to get. And then it goes, the high-end stuff, you still need to plug into a PC. So then you have to have a gaming PC and blah, blah, blah. But Oculus Quest 2 is the place to start.
Gotcha. And then let's say somebody has a headset and they want to come watch one of your shows. Where can they find you? I know it's an alt space, but I know there's a few different places you can travel in there.
Yeah. So the best place is probably to start in some place that you're most familiar. So you could go to our Instagram at the Simulation Nation. You could go to our Discord, Simulation Nation, or you could go to our Twitter at SimNation VR. And then we're always posting links to the events. And then that link, you could RSVP to an event. You can put on your headset, download the AltSpace app, and then you will already be RSVP to our events. You can just click on the event and then you'll teleport right into our world.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's probably the easiest way for those unfamiliar with with virtual reality.
Yeah, well, it's good to know. And Johnny, thank you again for coming on the show. It's it's been a real pleasure talking to you. You have a lot of knowledge when it comes to this stuff. So I've learned a lot in our discussion. So it's been a lot of fun, and I really do appreciate your time.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Thanks for reaching out, and thanks for giving me the platform to just jibber jabber about things I love for a little while. So really appreciate it, and stay plugged, and I'll see you in the metaverse.
Sounds good, man.